I can't breathe. I begged as I reached for my inhaler. My older brother smiled, held it just inches from my fingertips, and said 4 words I'll never forget: "Earn it, little sister." 20 years later, he sat in a courtroom so confident he could lie his way out of everything, until a forgotten video appeared on the screen, and I watched every bit of color drain from his face. My name is Hannah. I'm 33 years old, and for most of my life, people told me I was too sensitive when it came to my brother. That's just Mason. He likes to tease. He's only joking. Funny how the people who say things like that are never the ones gasping for air. I was diagnosed with severe asthma when I was 6. My inhaler wasn't something I carried because it made me feel safe. I carried it because sometimes it was the only thing standing between me and the emergency room. The doctors were very clear with my parents. If she has an attack, don't wait. Every second matters. Mom nodded every time. Dad promised they'd always keep an extra inhaler nearby. I believed them. But my brother, Mason, was different. He was 4 years older than me. Athletic. Popular. Loud. The kind of kid adults loved because he was charming whenever they were watching. The second they looked away, he became someone else. He'd hide my backpack before school. Throw away my homework. Lock me outside. If I cried, he'd grin. Can't take a joke? Whenever I told Mom, she sighed. Siblings fight. Dad always said the same thing. Be tougher. I tried. I really did. But asthma doesn't care how tough you are. When I was 13, my attacks became more frequent. Stress made them worse. Strong smells. Cold air. Even crying too hard. The doctor suggested keeping an inhaler in every room. Mom agreed. Mason rolled his eyes. So dramatic. One Saturday afternoon, Mom and Dad left for a charity fundraiser. They'd only be gone a few hours. Mason was told to watch me. He complained the entire time. I shouldn't have to babysit. I have plans. Mom kissed my forehead. Behave. Then they drove away. About an hour later, Mason invited 3 friends over. Music blasted through the house. Someone sprayed strong cologne everywhere. I immediately felt my chest tighten. I walked into the living room. Mason. I need you to turn that off. He barely looked at me. Go upstairs. I can't breathe. He sighed dramatically. So use your inhaler. I can't find it. He smiled. I can. My stomach dropped. You took it? He reached into his pocket and casually pulled out my blue rescue inhaler. He spun it around one finger. You hide my video games. I hide your inhaler. I never hid your games. Whatever. I stepped closer. Please. He held it above his head. What do you say? I said please. No. He laughed. Earn it. His friends laughed too. I started coughing. Hard. The room began spinning. I can't. He kept smiling. Jump for it. I tried reaching. He lifted it higher. Everything became blurry. My lungs burned. I fell onto my knees. One of his friends suddenly stopped laughing. Dude. I don't think she's kidding. Mason shrugged. She does this all the time. I collapsed onto the floor. That's when one of his friends, Tyler, grabbed Mason's arm. Give it back. Mason pulled away. Relax. Tyler didn't. He ripped the inhaler from Mason's hand and shoved it into mine. Use it. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped it. After several desperate breaths, the medicine finally started working. I could breathe again. Barely. Tyler looked furious. What is wrong with you? Mason rolled his eyes. She was fine. No. Tyler answered. She wasn't. When Mom and Dad came home, I told them everything. Every word. Every detail. Mom looked horrified. Then she turned toward Mason. Is this true? He laughed. It was just a joke. Dad rubbed his forehead. Hannah. Were you really that scared? I stared at him. I thought I was going to die. Mason interrupted. She always exaggerates. Dad sighed. Nobody died. Let's move on. Move on. Those two words became the soundtrack of my childhood. Every cruel prank. Move on. Every insult. Move on. Every humiliation. Move on. Years passed. I learned something important. The safest place wasn't home. It was anywhere my brother wasn't. I left for college at 18 with one suitcase and absolutely no intention of returning. Distance changed my life. I studied respiratory therapy. Ironically, helping people breathe became my career. Every patient reminded me why those childhood moments mattered. Every asthma attack reinforced the same truth. Seconds matter. People die. What Mason did had never been harmless. It had been dangerous. I built a good life. I bought my own house. Made wonderful friends. Eventually I married Ethan, a kind, patient man who never once told me I was too sensitive. The only shadow that remained was family gatherings. Mason never changed. He just became more subtle. Small insults. Passive-aggressive jokes. Comments about my career. Still playing nurse? You finally found people weaker than you. Everyone laughed awkwardly. Nobody confronted him. Mom always whispered. Please ignore him. Dad said. He's just trying to get a reaction. Then came the day everything changed. Dad suffered a stroke. Thankfully he survived. Recovery was slow. Mom couldn't manage everything alone. Despite our history, I came home almost every weekend to help. Medication schedules. Physical therapy. Doctor appointments. Mason rarely visited. But whenever he did, he acted like the devoted son. He'd stay 20 minutes. Take photos with Dad. Post them online. So grateful for family. Thousands of likes. Then he'd disappear for another month. I stayed because Dad needed me. Not because I'd forgotten the past. One evening, while organizing old paperwork in the basement, I found several dusty storage boxes. Inside were home videos. Birthday parties. Christmas mornings. School plays. I smiled watching little pieces of childhood I'd almost forgotten. Then I noticed one tape labeled simply. Summer barbecue. No year. No description. I set it aside, planning to watch it later. I had no idea that old videotape would eventually become the most important piece of evidence in my entire life. A few weeks later, Dad passed away peacefully in his sleep. Losing him hurt more than I expected. Even after everything, he was still my father. The funeral was beautiful. Friends shared stories. Neighbors brought food. People cried. Then, only 2 days after the burial, Mason called a family meeting. I think we should discuss Dad's estate. Mom looked shocked. So soon? He shrugged. It's practical. Something about his urgency made me uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. As everyone sat around the dining room table, Mason confidently opened a folder. I've already spoken with an attorney. My stomach tightened. Why would he do that before even speaking with us? Then he smiled. And in that moment, I realized my brother wasn't mourning our father. He was already planning his next move. I just didn't know yet that buried beneath years of lies, hidden inside forgotten memories, and waiting on one dusty videotape, Was the truth that would eventually make him tremble in a courtroom full of strangers. Dad had been gone for only 48 hours, and my brother was already talking about money. Not memories. Not grief. Not mom. Money. He slid several papers across the dining room table. I've been looking over Dad's assets. Mom stared at him. Mason, your father isn't even buried properly in my heart yet. He leaned back in his chair. That doesn't change reality. I felt sick. Can we please wait? He looked at me with that same smirk I'd hated since childhood. Still emotional, Hannah? I prefer being practical. I almost laughed. Practical. That was the word he always used whenever he wanted to excuse something cruel. He opened another folder. The house. The savings. The investment accounts. I think we should sell everything. Mom looked confused. Sell the house? It's too big for you. I'll help manage the sale. I noticed something strange. He never once said we. Everything was I. I'll handle it. I'll manage it. I've already spoken to people. When the meeting ended, something felt wrong. Very wrong. That night I couldn't sleep. The next morning I met Mom for breakfast. She looked exhausted. Hannah. I don't understand your brother. Neither do I. She quietly stirred her coffee. He keeps asking where your father's documents are. What documents? Insurance. Property records. Bank papers. I frowned. Dad always kept copies. She nodded. They're gone. My stomach tightened. Gone? I've looked everywhere. An uneasy feeling settled over me. Mason had always taken things he wanted. As a child it was toys. As an adult. Maybe it was something much bigger. That afternoon I visited Dad's attorney. Mr. Collins had known our family for almost 20 years. He greeted me kindly. I'm sorry about your father. Thank you. I actually have a question. He listened carefully as I explained the missing documents. His expression changed. Interesting. What? Mason already came here. I blinked. He did? Yesterday. What did he want? He asked if your father had updated his estate shortly before his death. What did you tell him? The truth. No. He hadn't. Then Mr. Collins paused. But your brother asked something unusual. What? He wanted to know whether video recordings could be challenged in court. My heart skipped. Video recordings? Yes. He seemed concerned. Concerned? About what? I thanked him and left. On the drive home, my phone rang. It was Tyler. The same Tyler who had ripped my inhaler out of Mason's hand 20 years earlier. We hadn't spoken much over the years, but every Christmas he'd send me a simple text. Hope you're doing well. I answered. Hi. Hannah. I heard about your dad. Thank you. There was an awkward silence. Then he said something unexpected. I've been meaning to call you for years. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. What about? Something happened after that asthma attack. I pulled into a parking lot. What do you mean? Tyler sighed. I never told you because I was a kid. But your brother wasn't proud afterward. He bragged. Cold chills ran down my arms. Bragged? Yeah. He told us. Tyler's voice became quieter. That he wanted to see how long you'd last before passing out. I stopped breathing for a second. What? He said. She'll be fine. I wanted to teach her who's in charge. My vision blurred. 20 years. For 20 years I've convinced myself maybe he'd been immature. Maybe he'd underestimated the danger. Maybe. Tyler destroyed every excuse I'd ever made. I'm sorry. He sounded genuinely heartbroken. I should have told your parents. You were 14. I know. But I've regretted it ever since. After we hung up, I sat inside my car crying. Not because of what Tyler said. Because someone had finally confirmed what I'd always feared. It hadn't been an accident. It had been deliberate. That evening I remembered the old videotapes. I drove straight to Mom's house. The basement was exactly as I'd left it. Dust everywhere. Cardboard boxes stacked to the ceiling. I found the tape labeled Summer Barbecue. Unfortunately, we no longer owned a VHS player. The next morning I took every tape to a media restoration company. The technician smiled. We can digitize these. How long? 3 days. Those 3 days felt endless. Meanwhile Mason became more aggressive. He called Mom repeatedly. We need to list the house. We need access to Dad's accounts. We're wasting time. Something about his urgency felt desperate. Rebecca. No. I reminded myself. This wasn't about lawyers yet. This was about discovering the truth. 3 days later my phone rang. Your videos are ready. I rushed over. The technician handed me a flash drive. There are about 32 recordings. That night Ethan and I watched them together. Birthday parties. Family vacations. Christmas mornings. Dad teaching me to ride a bike. Mom laughing in the kitchen. For a while, I forgot why I'd come. Then we reached the barbecue video. Someone, probably Dad, had been filming everyone in the backyard. Kids running. Adults talking. Music playing. The camera wandered around casually. Then, the recording continued after everyone thought filming had stopped. Dad apparently placed the camera on the patio table. It kept recording. Nobody noticed. The picture stayed fixed toward the backyard. Mason walked into view. He was around 17. I was 13. I suddenly appeared, coughing. Even through the old recording. I recognized that cough instantly. Asthma. I heard myself say. Mason. I need my inhaler. Then, the camera captured something nobody had ever seen. Mason reached into his pocket. He held up my inhaler. Smiled. And clearly said. Earn it. My heart pounded. The audio wasn't perfect. But it was understandable. Then the video captured something even worse. One of his friends asked. What if she can't breathe? Mason laughed. Relax. I'm timing her. Ethan looked at me. Neither of us spoke. I couldn't. Then Tyler stepped into frame. He grabbed Mason's wrist. They argued. The inhaler fell. I picked it up. Collapsed against the patio. The recording ended a minute later. I sat frozen. Ethan whispered. Hannah. This changes everything. I nodded slowly. It proves what happened. He looked back at the screen. No. It proves intent. Before I could process that, the video continued automatically into another short clip recorded later that same evening. Dad was speaking privately with Mason near the garage. The camera was still accidentally running. What happened today? Dad asked. Mason shrugged. Nothing. Dad looked unconvinced. Then, he said something that stunned me. If you ever risk your sister's life again, I won't protect you. Silence. Mason answered with a laugh. You always do. The video ended. Ethan looked at me in disbelief. Oh my God. Dad had known. Maybe not everything. But enough. Enough to confront him. Enough to threaten him. Yet somehow, nothing changed. For a long time neither of us moved. Finally Ethan asked, "What are you going to do?" I stared at the frozen image of 13-year-old me struggling to breathe. I don't know. But deep inside, I did know. Because 20 years after my brother held my inhaler over my head, the truth had finally found its voice. And my brother had absolutely no idea that an old forgotten videotape was about to become the evidence that could destroy every lie he'd spent 2 decades carefully protecting. 20 years. For 20 years, my brother had looked me in the eye and insisted I was too dramatic. For 20 years, my parents had convinced themselves that what happened during my asthma attack was nothing more than childish teasing. Now I had something no one could argue with. A video. Not a memory. Not my word against his. The truth. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw 13-year-old me reaching for that inhaler while Mason smiled. The next morning, Ethan gently squeezed my hand. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore." For the first time in years, I believed him. I called Mr. Collins, Dad's attorney, and asked for a meeting. When he watched the footage, he removed his glasses and sat silently for almost a minute. Finally, he looked at me. "Hannah, this explains a lot." "What do you mean?" He sighed. "Your father changed several legal documents after that summer." I frowned. "What documents?" "He didn't remove Mason from his estate. But he did something unusual." Mr. Collins unlocked a file cabinet and returned with a sealed envelope. "This was to be given to you only if a dispute arose between you and your brother after your father's death." My heart started racing. I carefully opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter from Dad. My hands trembled as I read. "Hannah, if you're reading this, then my greatest fear has come true. I failed you. I knew your brother had crossed a line that day, even if I didn't know every detail. I wanted to believe he would grow into a better man. Instead of protecting you, I kept hoping time would fix what courage should have. If Mason ever tries to control, threaten, or cheat you after I'm gone, don't protect him the way I did. Tell the truth. Love, Dad." By the time I finished reading, tears were running down my face. It wasn't a perfect apology. It couldn't erase my childhood. But it was the first time my father had admitted what he'd done wrong. Mr. Collins quietly said. He also left instructions. What instructions? If legal action ever became necessary regarding the estate, the court should receive every piece of relevant evidence. I looked at the flash drive in my hand. The video. Everything suddenly made sense. Mason hadn't rushed the estate because he was grieving. He was afraid. He knew evidence existed. He just didn't know where. A week later, everything exploded. Mason filed paperwork accusing me of interfering with Dad's estate. He claimed I was delaying distribution of assets for personal revenge. He even requested that I reimburse legal expenses. When I read the filing, I couldn't believe it. Even now. He thought he could bully me. Mr. Collins smiled calmly. Don't worry. We'll respond. The hearing was scheduled 6 weeks later. During those weeks, Mason acted more confident than ever. He posted Bible verses about forgiveness. He told relatives I was trying to destroy the family. Several cousins stopped speaking to me. An aunt sent me a message. Your brother says you're lying again. Again. That word hurt. Because it reminded me that no one had believed 13-year-old Hannah. This time would be different. The morning of the hearing, I felt sick. Not because I doubted the truth. Because I knew what that courtroom would force me to relive. When we arrived, Mason barely looked at me. He smiled at his attorney. They looked relaxed. Confident. Almost amused. The judge listened patiently as Mason's attorney argued. My client has attempted to settle this family matter peacefully. The respondent continues creating unnecessary conflict. Then Mason stood. He looked directly at the judge. My sister has hated me since childhood. She's rewriting history. None of these accusations ever happened. Those words hit harder than I expected. Even now. He couldn't admit what he'd done. Mr. Collins stood calmly. Your Honor. We'd like to introduce Exhibit 12. The courtroom lights dimmed. The projector came on. Mason frowned. What is this? No one answered. The screen lit up. A grainy backyard appeared. Children laughing. Music playing. Then, 13-year-old me walked into frame, coughing. I heard my own frightened voice. Mason. I need my inhaler. The courtroom became completely silent. Then everyone watched Mason pull the inhaler from his pocket. Smile. And clearly say, earn it. He froze. His attorney slowly turned toward him. The video continued. I'm timing her. The words echoed through the courtroom. No one moved. Not even the judge. Then Tyler appeared on the screen. Grabbing Mason. Taking the inhaler. Helping me breathe. When the recording ended, the silence somehow became even louder. Mason looked like he couldn't breathe himself. His attorney whispered. You never told me this existed. Mason didn't answer. Mr. Collins wasn't finished. We have one additional clip. The second recording began. Dad confronting Mason beside the garage. If you ever risk your sister's life again, I won't protect you. Then Mason's chilling reply. You always do. When the screen went black, I looked across the courtroom. For the first time in my entire life, my brother looked afraid. Not angry. Not arrogant. Afraid. The judge removed his glasses. He stared directly at Mason. Did you intentionally withhold medication from your sister during an asthma attack? Mason opened his mouth. Nothing came out. His attorney quietly stood. Your Honor. I need a brief recess. The judge shook his head. No. I asked your client a question. Everyone waited. Finally, Mason whispered. I was a kid. The judge answered immediately. You were old enough to understand the difference between a prank and preventing someone from breathing. No one defended him. Not Mom. Not relatives. No one. Then came the twist I never expected. Mom stood from the gallery. She was crying harder than I'd ever seen. Your Honor. The judge nodded. You may speak. She turned toward me instead. Hannah. I failed you. The courtroom disappeared around me. All I could hear was her voice. I believed the easier child. I kept asking you to forgive instead of asking him to change. She looked at Mason. I will never forgive myself for that. Mason stared at the floor. She walked toward me slowly. I'm so sorry. For 20 years. Those were the words I'd needed. Not because they fixed everything. Because they finally acknowledged the truth. The judge later ruled against Mason's claims regarding the estate. He criticized his dishonest testimony and noted that the video severely damaged his credibility. Mason left the courthouse without speaking to anyone. His attorney walked in the opposite direction. Even he looked embarrassed. Over the following months, the consequences spread. Relatives who had defended Mason apologized after watching the court footage. Several admitted they'd spent years believing I exaggerated everything. Tyler called me afterward. I should have spoken sooner. I smiled through tears. You spoke when it mattered. As for Mom, healing was slow. She started therapy. So did I. We didn't pretend the past never happened. We talked about it honestly for the first time. Some conversations ended in tears. Others ended in silence. But they ended with truth. I never saw Mason again after that hearing. A few months later, I heard he'd moved to another state. People asked why. I honestly didn't know. Maybe he was running from embarrassment. Maybe from guilt. Or maybe, for the first time in his life, he couldn't outrun the consequences of his own choices. Sometimes I still think about that little girl lying on the living room floor, desperately reaching for the inhaler she needed to survive. I wish I could tell her something. I'd kneel beside her and say, "One day, people will believe you. It'll take years. It'll hurt more than you can imagine. But the truth doesn't disappear just because someone powerful laughs at it." Today I still keep an inhaler in my purse. Another in my car. One at work. Old habits never completely disappear. Neither do old scars. But every time I take a deep, easy breath, I'm reminded of something far more important. My brother once believed he controlled my ability to breathe. He never realized that one forgotten camera would eventually take away the only thing he truly cared about. His ability to lie. And as I walked out of that courthouse into the fresh afternoon air, I took the deepest breath of my life. Not because my lungs had finally healed, but because, after 20 years, my voice finally had.